Hello, and welcome to this year's next.legal summit. My name is Jared Correa, and I'm going to be presenting to you today on what legal consumers want from law firms in 2020. You may be surprised to find out, especially if you're a lawyer. As I said, my name is Jared Correa, and I'm a business management consultant for attorneys. I'll talk a little bit what I do briefly before I head into this presentation. But first, I wanted to thank Raymond DeSimway and his team at Vitalis Advocates for inviting me to speak at this program today. And also congratulations on their success with this second annual Next.legal Summit. I think this is a pretty amazing conference, and I'm happy to just be a part of it, and I hope you all are as well. And hopefully you'll be coming back next year also. So briefly about what I do. So again, my name is Jared Correa. I am a former attorney and now business management consultant for law firms. And I've been doing that work for about 15 years at this point. And I've consulted with probably 4,000 law firms across the globe. So I have lawyers who reach out to me directly. And then I also have partnerships with bar associations in the United States, for which I am their official consulting partner. I talk to lawyers about technology management, financial management, marketing, administrative management. Talking to as many law firms as I have, I pretty much have seen it, right? If there's an issue that you have as a law firm, I've likely dealt with in the past. And I really like working with law firms and seeing them grow. So I have a company called Red Cave Law Firm Consulting, which is my consulting business. And I also have a software company called Gideon, which offers website chat for law firms. So I'm going to begin. Enough about me. I'll have contact information at the end of the presentation, but let's get started. So I want to cover this idea of the disconnect between legal consumers and law firms from several different angles, right? Not seven. I meant to say several. I'm not exactly sure how many points I have. There are a lot of things that are happening in terms of consumers, especially of legal services, and lawyers don't understand a lot of it. One telling statistic that just came out was due to the pandemic in the United States, 23% of legal consumers, which is just a massive percentage of legal consumers, believe that law firms are closed. Now, that's an assumption that they're making. And they're making that because, in large part, they see court closures all over the country. And so they're just assuming that the entire legal industry is shut down. What's kind of damning about that statistic is that 2% of law firms think the consumers think they're closed. It's a big gap, right? And so what that means is that the most very basic level of messaging, like, is your business actually open for business? Lawyers are failing to communicate with clients. So lawyers should be telling legal consumers that they're open. Lawyers should be saying that there's no business interruption, or here are the business interruptions I've had. Here are the accommodations I've made, right? But they're not doing it because they don't understand legal consumers at a basic level. And there are tons and tons of these misunderstandings that occur. And so what that means is that lawyers are less likely to generate quality leads in the first place. And beyond that, lawyers are even less likely to convert those quality leads. 65% of lawyers in the United States surveyed during Clio's 2019 Legal Trends Report did not return voicemails that consumers left for them. So over 50% of those leads go entirely to waste. If you're spending any money on marketing, putting any money into marketing whatsoever, you might as well just take that money and burn it. So let's talk today about things that are happening in terms of legal consumer trends, how law firms don't understand that, but how law firms can take better advantage of it. So let's start with law firm referrals. One thing that's really interesting is that the nature of law firm referrals are changing significantly. Most law firms are based on referral marketing. I would say that probably most of the law firms I've consulted with, which are usually small law firms, like 1 to 50 attorneys, 90% of their work is generated from referrals, in-person networking. Even pre-pandemic, that was changing significantly. So while lawyers still focused almost exclusively on those methods for gaining referrals, the fact of the matter is that consumers are looking to those other professionals who are your referral sources, other lawyers, less and less than they ever have before. So referrals from family members and friends are actually outstripping referrals from other attorneys and business professionals. So it's not the case anymore. The lawyer could go to a doctor, or a lawyer could go to a mortgage broker or a lender, or a lawyer could go to whomever to get a referral and have that referral be largely guaranteed, right? Now you're seeing a lot of inroads being made by people who are asking family members, friends, people they know in the community for referrals to lawyers. These people may not be lawyers themselves. In fact, they likely are not. These people may not be business professionals that you anticipate would be referring folks into lawyers. Post-pandemic, that's only exacerbated, right? More and more people are stuck at home than they've been previously. So that being the case, more and more people are relying on friends and family members for referrals. So what does that mean? Well, since the referral game is changing, the way that lawyers generate referrals should be changing also. So I'm not saying that you kill the referral networking that's worked for you for years, right? You don't just all of a sudden stop talking to other professionals. They're still going to give you referrals. But you have to recognize that a lot more referrals than ever before are now coming from friends, families. And you're not going to be able to pinpoint friends and families, right? You're not going to know that this particular family is going to be a great source for lawyer referrals, right? So what that really means is that people are talking in their communities. So you have to be more involved as a community attorney, right? So that may not mean you go to a professional networking group, right? Or you do, but you supplement it with community involvement activities. Like maybe you coach the baseball team. Maybe you're involved in the school committee. Maybe you run for the school committee. Maybe you set up a local group for moms. Any number of things you could do, right? And the idea here is that you get into a community at a level of depth. And it's not about selling directly. Like you're not passing your business card out to everybody necessarily all the time. But this is a form of social selling. So you're saying things like, oh, as it comes up in conversation, oh, I have a law practice. I do X. Now you're in the minds of those people. So when a family member or a friend comes to them and says, hey, do you know a lawyer who does this? They can say, yes, I know that lawyer. That lawyer is the coach of my son's baseball team. And so you better cover yourself for those types of referrals. Now, the challenge is during a global pandemic, it's harder and harder to do those things, right? Getting involved in the community is different than what it was a year ago. So you're not necessarily involved in a community that's as open as it once was. So you start to have to figure out, okay, how do I turn what was an analog marketing program into a digital marketing program? How do I communicate with people online, right? You do Zoom meetings like this. You communicate via email or Slack more often than you have before. But you figure out the ways that people are engaging in your community currently. You figure out the organizations, formal and informal, that they're using, and then you adopt their communication patterns. So as a law firm, really important to look at community-based referrals as well as traditional referrals and diversify a little bit. I'm not taking into account web marketing currently because we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but in-person networking, not dying, just changing. Right, Chuck Norris. Okay. Let's talk about web marketing a little bit. So I'm going to talk about 3 different ways that lawyers market and how they can improve on that. We already talked about in-person networking, referral generation, how that's changing. Now let's talk a little bit about paid advertising. So law firms are going to usually have those 3 buckets in which they market: referral marketing, paid advertising, and then content marketing, which I'll talk about next. In terms of paid advertising, um, what people often refer to as search engine optimization or search engine marketing. Traditionally, people think of that as like, how do I get to page one in Google? You don't necessarily want to be thinking about it in that way, but you're thinking about how do I improve my search engine rankings, right? How do I become more relevant when people are looking for particular topics related to my law practice? So, in terms of that, you want to be very local in your focus. So, I just talked about the fact that community referrals are generating at a higher rate than ever before. What's also happening is that those in person referrals are reducing. The other thing that's going on is that more and more legal consumers than ever before are doing independent research. So while that referral marketing networking program still lives on for you and your law firm, over 50% of people at this point are conducting their own research to find out how to access an attorney, or which attorney to use, I should say, without asking anyone, right? And that makes sense too. But it's not just a pandemic thing, right? This was on the rise before the pandemic ever happened. So what we're looking at now is a situation where those referrals still exist, but even outside of that referral situation, more and more people are just Googling for an attorney, or they're not necessarily just Googling, right? They're searching on social media or platforms they like where they get their information from. But those are still highly localized searches. Law firms are always going to be localized to the extent that there are ethics rules based on jurisdictions that law firms have to follow. But most law firms are hyper-local businesses because they're serving a community. So I just said that doesn't necessarily mean that they're as active as they should be in a community, but they are functionally servicing a community. If you're a lawyer in Boston, Massachusetts, right, where I'm from, you're not looking for clients from St. Louis, Missouri. You're looking for clients in a specific geographic area. And two things happen in search. So when people are searching, they'll often include a geographic identifier. Like where I'm from, right? If I wanted an estate plan done, I would say estate planning attorney, Boston, right? And even if I don't do that, the search engine results are going to toggle to my locality automatically without me even doing anything. So that means that if somebody's looking for an attorney and they're not even adding a geographic identifier, they're more likely to find you. So winning as an attorney in terms of marketing and paid advertising is winning in local search. So everything you do in terms of marketing your practice should be hyper localized. So you should be thinking about what communities do my clients draw from? How can I be very active in those communities for referrals? What communities are my clients searching from? How can I optimize for those searches? There's many different ways to do it. You can create directory profiles, which have location options attached. You could market for certain keywords that relate to your practice area location, right? You could add a Google Maps component, paid or otherwise, that you could utilize to generate more leads from a locality, right? You could write about local issues. You could do that anyway, even if you're not hiring a search engine optimization firm. But I will tell you, if you're using a digital marketing firm as an attorney, the expense is going to be there. That's going to run you roughly $2,000 to $4,000 a month US. And if you're running a viable campaign, right, it's probably closer to $4,000 a month, right? So what you need to be thinking about is, okay, how do I maximize that? And the way you maximize it is to get someone who understands local search. Now, the other thing I would say here is as you look for digital marketing companies, if you don't have somebody now that you're using for search optimization, what I would think about doing is finding somebody whose business philosophy is they're not taking on competitors in your market. Because the last thing you want is the marketing firm that's representing you, representing the law firm down the street that has the same practice area and they're utilizing the same marketing tactics, right? It's not as big of a competitive advantage for you. So, first two segments here, local focus is important. Okay. Let's now talk about the search habits of legal consumers. So as I said before, one of the things that's interesting is now more than ever, people are doing independent research to find an attorney. So now more than ever, what's really, really important is that you're visible in those searches. And as I said, there's different ways to be visible in those searches. One way is to pay for visibility. So you're running pay-per-click campaigns. You have you're utilizing Google Maps, right? You are advertising on search engines. The other things that consumers are doing online, which is interesting, is they're doing what is called long tail keyword search. So if you're a law firm and you are buying a pay-per-click advertising campaign, you're usually utilizing keywords, right? And you're dumping a lot of money into those keywords. Some of those keywords are personal injury, let's say, torts, right? Now think of that from a legal consumer's perspective. A legal consumer has no idea what a tort is. They might think it's a tart, right? Slightly different. Legal consumers may not know that if they're hurt in a car accident, it's called personal injury law, right? What do they know? They know they're hurt in a car accident. So when a legal consumer searches for something online, searches, let's talk about search engines to start with. They're going to type in, I was driving down the highway with my aunt and I was hurt in a car crash. I need an attorney, right? Now, it's tough to resonate in that search, right? It's tough to be really relevant because not many people are talking about somebody's aunt getting hurt in a car accident, right? There are ways to figure out how to rank in this situation, however. So you could pay for some keywords, right? Maybe you've got attorney, right? And maybe that search defaults to a location. So you've got some leverage there. But maybe you did write something about somebody's aunt being hurt in a car accident, right? Maybe someone gets involved in a drunk driving accident and they say, oh, I was caught drunk driving. I need a lawyer's help, you know? Or I was caught drunk driving. I got to go to court. What do I do? Or I got to go to court. What do I wear? Now, if you're a lawyer who's supplementing what you've done in terms of paid advertising with content marketing, which I'll talk more about in a second, but let's say you've written a blog post about, hey, you got a DUI. What do you wear to court? Or you have a video about that and you've got that video published on YouTube and you've got that video published on your website. Now, Google is not only looking for, okay, this person's paying for search engine optimization, so we're ranking them, but also they have relevant content, so we're ranking them on that basis. And let's say you've been writing about these topics for a long time, and people at other websites say, hey, this person looks like an authority. We're going to publish their content on our website. Well, now you've got something called backlinks working, and you don't have to pay for those, but that's also going to have Google or Bing or whomever search engine spiders, which crawl websites to figure out what the most relevant search results are, say, hey, this firm or this lawyer is a real expert in this topic. So we're going to deliver this content to the person who's searching for it. That's a big advantage. And if you're doing those two things, if you're generating content as well as paying for advertising, you have an advantage over a law firm that's doing just one of those things. Two more things to consider in the way that legal consumers are searching for attorneys. The first is that those legal consumers are using mobile devices more than ever before. Something like 60% of searches take place on mobile, right? That's mostly because everybody's searching on their phones. Also, some people who are searching on tablets, but we're basically looking at Android and iOS devices. So your web presence, your marketing presence, what you do in terms of paid advertising, that should not only be focused on local, it should be focused on mobile. So how are you getting to people on mobile devices? How are you using SMS, right? Now, the other component that's interesting about that is that the assumptions law firms often make is that people are searching for lawyers via Google or a search engine. That's not always the case. So there's a phenomenon called in-app search, which means that instead of me going to a browser like Chrome or Internet or Microsoft Edge, I'm going to like Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever social media service I'm on. Now, most law firms that pay for advertising just drop a whole boatload of money into search optimization. But you don't know what your client's preferred search method is, right? Maybe a particular client is on Facebook a lot, and maybe that's a high wealth individual who's like looking at pictures of their grandchild. You just don't know. So the idea is, much like playing the stock market, is diversifying your marketing. So you want to be in a position where you appear in a number of different places. And if you can't tell what popular service your clients or consumers are using to find you, get into as many of them as possible. So if you're available on the heavy traffic social media services, if you're available via Google search results, that's better than being available in only one of those places, right? And then you can start to track that data and information. So you can find out as a firm, especially if you're using a digital marketing agency or you're using like Google Analytics as yourself, or for yourself, you can kind of figure out, okay, like X percentage of my leads are coming from here. Y percentage of my leads are coming from here. And over time, you can start to figure out how that changes your marketing strategy. I'm getting more dollars from this source, so I'm going to start sinking more dollars into that source. And those are the decisions that you'll start to make. But you got to get the data in place first. And then before you get the data having any meaningfulness at all, you've got to be in a position where you've got enough traction on any of those places to get data, right? Without content that you're posting on social media, without interactions that are happening there, you're not getting enough data to make a valid comparison of what you should be doing. So, as a lawyer who's working to take advantage of trends, who's looking at what legal consumers are actually doing, understand that those searches are taking place also outside of search engines, also in social media. And you want to be able to take advantage of that by tracking data and analyzing that data to improve your marketing spend. Shout out to the Zach Morris cell phone. All right, here's the other piece of this. So as I said before, legal consumers can be broken up into several different pies, right? So there are the legal consumers who search for leads from referral sources, right? And then there are the legal consumers who search online by themselves, right? Who aren't looking for advice from other people. And that's roughly like a 50-50 split. But there's not a lot of conversion there. So only about 15% of legal consumers do both. So largely they're choosing one or the other. And those legal consumers that, and I'll talk more about this in a little bit, those legal consumers that hire you or that want to hire a lawyer, I should say, really want to hire a lawyer. Like they're desperate. They want to talk to you. They need your services. They want to access your services as quickly as possible. But there's a whole other subset of legal consumers who are not looking for referrals, but it's that subset of people who are searching for themselves online about legal solutions. They are hardcore DIY customers, which means they're going to want to do this themselves. So those consumers don't want to hire a lawyer for many reasons, but probably because they think a lawyer is too expensive, probably because they also feel like they can do it themselves, right? So for those consumers, they're more likely to use a service like LegalZoom, right? So, or Rocket Lawyer, so they can just get documents drafted, or do not pay, or something like that, right? They will find a lawyer alternative if they can. Now, for the longest time, lawyers have said, well, we don't like these consumers. They don't want to hire us. We're not going to market to them. We're not going to provide solutions to them. And what's happened in that case is there have been these technology companies who have stepped into the breach who said, hey, those consumers are good with us. We're going to provide services to those people. And while the margins might not be as high on each individual transaction, we can get a lot of them because we don't have the same jurisdictional limitations that attorneys do. So you've got a situation in which lawyers are being undercut on their pricing by these services. And if you're a savvy enough consumer, you may say to yourself, I'm just going to buy a will kit somewhere and do my own estate plan. I don't need a lawyer for that. A lawyer is going to cost too much money. In many cases, those consumers are right? But what lawyers have not thought about is figuring out like, okay, what can I deliver to DIY consumers that I'm not delivering right now? There's no reason that a law firm couldn't operate like LegalZoom, right? They just don't. So traditional law is service provision, right? Working one-on-one with a professional at a high cost. But lawyers can sell products too. And the idea of products has changed significantly. An Economist article, something like 30 years ago, defined a product as something you could stub your toe on. But we're in a digital world now, and that's not really the case anymore. So lawyers out there, law firms out there are starting to sell products, not services. Obvious one is documents, right? Like just because Rocket Lawyer or LegalZoom or some other company is selling documents, legal documents, doesn't mean you can't also. So go out there and sell your legal documents, right? And the advantage here is that there's technology that makes this widely available now. There are tools out there that will allow you to present questions directly to clients who will then complete questionnaires and have documents completed on the back end. No fuss, no muss, right? So as an attorney, let's say you charge $1,500 for an estate plan, but that's because you're providing personal service, right? You're the one who's thoroughly editing those plans. You're providing advice and counsel. In this case, you're selling a product. You're selling a set of documents. So you can charge less for that. And that process could be entirely automated, right? So law firms could set that up. Law firms could also sell courses, right, on the law. Like, let me talk about this legal process in a generic way that's not tied to a consumer specific use case or hypothetical. Maybe you have a series of podcasts. Maybe you have a series of videos. Maybe you use one of these course platforms like Udemy or Podia, and you sell courses instead. That's not as expensive as if somebody's going to walk into your office and ask you a bunch of questions. So the traditional lawyer notion has been to completely ignore the DIY client, make no money from them. But modern lawyers are starting to see if we can provide a solution for this group of legal consumers, these DIY clients, at that point, we're going to be able to make more than we had before, which is zero. It's going to be less than we make when we're providing traditional service to these clients. But again, we're going to be spending less time. So there's the trade off. So as a law firm, you're likely thinking about new pricing models anyway. And some of those pricing models should reflect DIY consumers. Law firms are starting to use subscription services. Law firms are starting to use alternative payment and billing arrangements now, finally, after a long time of just leaning into the hourly billing. But lawyers are thinking of different ways to market and package their practices now, and that's largely a good thing. So when you have consumers in place and you've got things that appeal to them, like Mr. Sparkle, make sure that you're ramping that up and focusing on it. That's a unique sales proposition for you as a law firm. So talk about what consumers want from a lawyer in terms of skill set, right? So one thing that lawyers are really good at is talking about how awesome they are. So if you go to any law firm website in the world, it will say, hey, this lawyer is great. This lawyer won this many awards. This lawyer graduated from this prestigious institution or set of institutions. This lawyer has published all this amazing stuff. To a consumer who's looking at that, there's very little differentiation, right? People are like, oh, look at that. Here's one lawyer who went to a better school than me. Here's 1,000. So this is not a bad thing, right? But it's a bad thing if it's the only thing you do. So it's absolutely true. Consumers want a lawyer who's good at what they do, right? It totally makes sense. But all the awards, all the fluff, you've got to support that with the answering some other specific questions that consumers have. Don't just be the leg lamp in the window. So the real question is, are you good at a specific type of law? So think about it. A consumer is not going to be like, hey, this lawyer looks awesome. I bet they could do anything they put their mind to, right? No, they're not thinking that. We're in a very segmented society now, right? There's a lot of people, They have a lot of specific roles. So consumers are aware that there are lawyers who do certain things, right? So if I need an estate plan, I'm going to go to an attorney who's an estate planning lawyer. If I need a divorce, I'm going to go to an attorney who's a divorce attorney. If I have gotten into a scrape and I need a criminal lawyer, I'm going to someone who does criminal law. So you not only have to talk about how you are a good lawyer, quote unquote, generally speaking, you also need to talk about the fact that you're a good lawyer in a specific category of law. So think about it. There are two ways that that works. The first is if you've got somebody who's going to pass along a referral to you and somebody needs a divorce, right? They're going to say, hey, Jimmy, I need a lawyer. Can you help me? And Jimmy's like, oh, yeah, my friend Tanya's a lawyer. She does a million things. She'd probably be good at divorces, right? And then you've got Jimmy who says, potentially, oh, you should go see my friend Tanya. She's a specialist in divorce. That's all she does. As a consumer, I'm taking the second referral, not the first, right? And the reason for that is because I know somebody's going to help me with a specific problem. So when consumers seek out lawyers, they want service really fast because they're at a crossroads in their lives. They've got a specific issue that they think only a lawyer can solve. Advantage you. But the point is that they also have a specific issue. So you need to present as somebody who's able to solve that. So on the referral side, you've got to continually tell your referral sources what you do. You've got to refine the messaging for them so that they can say, hey, use this person. This person's awesome at this. No, on the marketing side, I talked before about content marketing. I talked before about local search. One of the things you're going to be focused on is not just locality, but also practice area. So you want to be ranking for like estate planning attorney, Decatur, Georgia, right? Or you want to be ranking for, criminal lawyer, Meriden, Connecticut, whatever it is, right? You're going to throw that into the mix as well. Those are keywords you're going to be buying. And alternatively, when you're doing content marketing, when you're putting videos together or podcasts or blog posts, you're going to be talking about, hey, I do this kind of work. And the best way to produce content is to think like, what are the 10 most common questions that my clients have? And how do I answer those questions? And then write them up or talk about them in some kind of content format. So that when people are asking around, when people are searching like, okay, estate planning attorney, Beverly Hills, California, they're going to find you, right? And one of the reasons they're going to find you is because it's something you talk about. So as I said, lawyers are really good about saying that they're good at practicing law. Lawyers are not as good about talking about a specific niche practice that they have. And by the way, niche practice is a huge win, not only because it defines you down for consumers, but also because it reduces competition, right? So if you're an estate planning lawyer, you have fewer people to compete with than if you were a general practice attorney, right? And if you're an estate planning attorney who does special needs trusts for children, you're now even in a deeper niche, right? There's fashion law niches. I have friends of mine who are student loan lawyers, right? If there are like 5 or 6 lawyers in a practice area, that's better than being like a generic estate planning attorney, which I could throw a stone at from my house and hit 7 of them. This plays into the unique sales proposition. This is what clients are looking for, potential clients. They want somebody who can solve their particular issue quickly. So let's talk about some other things that consumers wish for. They want to understand the legal process. So drilling down on this topic, and there's a reason why I structured the presentation in this way, consumers want to know you're good at law. Consumers want to know you're good at a niche practice. They want to hear that you've worked with people in their situation before. They want to know that you have hypotheticals in play that you've dealt with. But they also want to know how this is going to work, right? So think about it. When I'm on the market for buying a consumer good, let's say I am home all the time because there's a global pandemic, hypothetically, right? I'm going to go buy Netflix and HBO Max and Disney Plus for my family to watch. And I'm going to pay like $6 a month for those. And I'm going to get like all the content that streaming provider has. So as a legal consumer, that's often my buying experience. I have an inherent idea of the value and it's cheap. Now, when I go to a lawyer, right? Let's say I have a DUI. I'm scared. I have no idea what the legal process looks like. And I come to a lawyer and I'm getting like $5,000 retainer. And I say, what's that? I don't have to pay that for anything else. If I buy a streaming service, I pay $50 a year, right? Or let's say I go to a divorce attorney and I sit down with that divorce attorney and she says, yeah, I'm going to charge you $400 an hour. Until when? Until the case is over. Now I'm starting to sweat, right? Because I don't know when the case is going to be over. I don't know how many hours it takes. So at the first level, you need to be able to talk to consumers to show that you're a guide, to show that you have the niche expertise, to talk about this is what the process looks like. This is how I handle a divorce. This is how I handle a DUI. And lawyers have not traditionally done that for a couple reasons. The first is that they're worried about ethics, right? So here's the deal. There's a thing called disclaimers that you can use. So when somebody goes to your website, you tell them, hey, there's no attorney-client relationship until we sign an engagement agreement. And by the way, don't give me confidential information. Do the same thing when you have an initial consultation with somebody. Have these conversations, protect yourself. You decide not to work with somebody, send them a non-engagement letter, right? Or a non-engagement letter via email. You can paper this trail so that you can talk to clients about the legal process. I think that's a non-issue. The bigger issue to me is that lawyers have traditionally been taught by other lawyers who are also terrible salespeople. So what you want to do is be more transparent. And I often give and lawyers, like traditionally lawyers will say, I'm only giving my client like a tease of what I can do for them because I want them to want more, come back to me and have me do the rest. That's not how it works. The more clients understand about the process, the more likely they are to hire you actually. So think about a situation in which my toilet is clogged, right? And I call a plumber and I'm like, my toilet's clogged. Can you tell me what I can do about it? And the plumber's like, well, I would do these 20 things. And I'm not going to be like, hey, that's fantastic. Thanks for coming over. I'm going to now do this myself. No, I don't want to unclog my own toilet. That's why I have the plumber. And law practice is very much like that. People don't want to unplug their own toilets, right? Somebody's not going to be like, oh, hey, thanks for that information. I'm going to go to law school, get a degree, apprentice at a law firm for a few years, come back, manage this case, and then like next decade, I'll tell you how it went. No, the more complex you make it sound, the harder it seems, the more likely someone is to hire you. And remember, those legal consumers that want to hire a lawyer really, really want to hire a lawyer. They're stressed out. They have a big problem they can't figure out. That's why they're coming to you. So you have to be the guide, but you have to tell them where you're guiding them to. So if you were a Sherpa and you were helping someone to climb a mountain and somebody was like, hey, how are we going to get there? And you're like, I will just climb up. I'm not feeling like particularly helped, right? If somebody's like, okay, I have these pathways that I use and we take this path and that's followed by that path. And then we stop here and it'll take us like however many hours to get to the top of the mountain. That's what people want to hear from you. They're frightened. They're worried. They're scared. You got to calm them down. The way you calm people down is to give them information and knowledge. So as I referenced before, consumers also want to know the total cost of representation. So take that streaming analogy, right? I know that for like $60 a year, I can get the entire Disney content vault, right, on Disney Plus. That's so easy for me to make that purchase. When I'm talking to a lawyer is telling me this is uncapped. I do hourly billing. And what does the consumer know about lawyers? Consumer knows that lawyers are greedy and they drive nice cars, right? Most often not actually true, right? But that's the consumer impression because they watch TV shows. And when a consumer sits down with you, they can logically figure out, hey, like there's a lot of work to be put in here, a lot of hours to be spent. I'm paying a high cost per hour and I don't know when it's going to end, right? That's really concerning for consumers. So if I'm a legal consumer and I'm sitting there with like a divorce attorney, I'm calculating how much this is going to cost me. So the challenge is that most attorneys can't tell legal consumers what the total cost of representation is going to be, or they're unwilling to guess. So when you think about it, if you're a legal consumer and you're sitting there and you're like, there's no cap on this, I've got an attorney who's working hourly. So there's actually an incentive to work slower. Well, the biggest problem with the billable hour is that there's an incentive to be inefficient, and consumers know that, by the way. So what they're going to want to hear is like, I think this is going to cost you around $40,000, right? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But as you start quoting prices, you get better at this type of thing. So this is one of the reasons why you're seeing lawyers move to different pricing mechanisms. So flat fees, you're seeing more of split fees. You're seeing more of unbundled representation, which they call it in the court system, or limited scope representation, which essentially means we're breaking this representation down into 5 components, right? A, B, C, D, and E. A is going to cost this, B is going to cost this, C, D are going to cost this. So what we're going to do is we're going to do A, and we're going to have a very limited scope agreement for A. Engagement agreement is going to reflect that. And then if A goes well, let's decide if we want to work on B together. If B goes well, let's decide if we want to work on C together, et cetera, et cetera. What that does is that clamps down the cost for consumers, and it lets them decide, and the attorney decide as well. The attorney has freedom here too to move to the next stage or not. So it protects everybody. You see a lot of law firms using risk collars as well. So the way that works is a law firm would say, hey, I think this is going to cost X amount of money. It's going to take this many hours to do. However, if I am below my estimate in hours, I get a bonus. But if I go over my estimate in hours, you get a discount for every hour I perform on top of what I suspected. That's a little bit different from a straight flat fee, but it protects both sides. And as I talked about before, you see a lot of law firms moving toward selling products. Also, law firms are selling subscription services like traditional software companies have, or so should I say, probably non-traditional still, SaaS sales models. So you're doing like a monthly or annual fee, and then the client's getting certain things for that, right? And maybe you throw products on top of this. Maybe you say, hey, I've got X number of services I'm going to provide you per month, but I'm also giving you this package of documents. And you also get to listen to like our lockdown podcast. That stuff's valuable to legal consumers as well. So what I would say is, first of all, consumers are going to want to know the total cost of representation, not the total hourly cost. So it does nothing for a consumer if you tell them I charge $400 per hour, right? It does something for the consumer if they say the all in, we're going to be at $20,000. Like if I was buying a car, I wouldn't want the dealer to say, hey, it's going to cost you like $700 for every mile you drive, right? No, I want to know that I'm buying that car for like $50,000 or whatever. So have that answer in place, whatever that answer is. And if getting closer to that answer means revising your fee structure, then that's okay too. There's a lot of options you can utilize to do that for sure. So when a consumer meets with a lawyer, they're looking like this, saying, "Oh my God, it's a pile of money I'm just going to have to shove in this person's direction to solve my problem." So if you can cap that pile of money, make it smaller potentially in the eyes of the consumer, that's helpful. Last couple of things I want to talk about. So modern lawyers want to engage law firms. What does that mean? So that means consumers want to be able to have a conversation or take a next step with a law firm. And they want that to happen quickly. 85% of consumers want to be able to engage with the law firm they talk to within 24 hours. And up to 25% of consumers want a response from the law firm in 3 hours or less. So most lawyers look at that and they have very analog practices where that response has got to be somebody from the office calling them back, a secretary, the lawyer themselves. That's just not workable. People are too busy to do that. So the way to engage leads effectively in 2020 is to utilize systems to do that. So you want to allow people ideally to have a conversation, taking up a next step that doesn't involve someone from your office. So we're talking about things like virtual receptionist services who can answer phones for you, even when you're out of the office, even when it's off hours. You're talking about things like calendaring tools. You're talking about things like Calendly, Acuity, some others. You're talking about things like chat services, right? So that people can have a conversation on a website, whether it's with a person or with a bot, and move forward and maybe even schedule an appointment potentially, right? You want consumers to be able to have a conversation or take a next step, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be you as a physical person or your staff person as a physical person who's doing that. And the advantage here is important. So if you look at the level of engagement, so 9 out of 10 times, 90% of the time, if a law firm engages a consumer effectively, That consumer is not going to go talk to another law firm before they talk with the law firm that engaged them. So that doesn't guarantee that you're going to get the lead converted, but what it does guarantee is that you're going to get the first bite of the apple, largely. So if you give consumers that next step, if you allow them to do that in an automated fashion, you can engage them instantly. You don't even have to wait the 3 hours. They take the next step, they move forward, and that's a lead that you can convert. You have a big advantage in converting that lead. So what I would say as far as that's concerned is if you look at everything that we've talked about here, right? The idea is to derive leads, bring them to your site, bring them to your web portal. But then a lot of law firms lose people at that point. You want to engage them quickly, instantaneously, give them a next step, because remember, consumers don't understand anything about the legal process. Even what's the next step they take with a lawyer, you give them clear answers to that, you're going to convert way more clients. All right, my time is basically up, but I've enjoyed talking with you today. As I said before, my name is Jared Coreira, and I'm a business management consultant, and I also own a software company. Our software company provides chat services for law firm websites, and my consulting company provides advice to law firms across the globe. If you want to talk with me, you've got a couple options there, email addresses, and then my phone number is also accessible as well. You can also check out either website, redcavelegal.com or gideon.legal, to get more information. So thanks again for having me. It's been a pleasure, and I've really enjoyed talking with you today.